Hey Lex, how are you?
I'm doing good, Grant. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm super pumped to have you on the show today to not only to talk about your mindset, but just to really understand everything about your journey and how you've dealt with adversity and how you're still getting prepared for the Olympics that's been pushed off for another year. So there's just so many things that I'm really interested and excited to talk to you about today.
Absolutely. It should be a great conversation. I'm excited also.
All right. All right. Well, let's kick it off as I always do with my favorite topic, mental toughness. And I can only imagine out of all the Olympics and all the medals and everything that you've had to deal with personally, you've had to deal with a lot of mentally tough situations. So when you think of the word or words, mental toughness, what does that mean to you?
Mental toughness, I think for me, having that having that strength, having that ability to withstand challenging circumstances.
Mm. And I know you've had tons of them throughout your life, but is there a
Yes.
specific time? Like, can you go back to that specific time where you had to be mentally tough, whether if it's in your career or in life?
Well, I think that of course, the elephant in the room is overcoming blindness.
Right.
But I would say that in my athletic career, there was a world championships that I had competed in, and we were in Doha, Qatar. So I'm a blind long jumper, and I have a guide who stands at the takeoff board, and he's it didn't it didn't. You're on the. I'm sorry.
You were there?
Yeah, I thought I had lost you for a second.
Yeah, it did. Give me 1 second here. I'm trying to free up, make sure. All right. Maybe we should we start over?
That works for me.
All right, cool. All right. Okay, cool. All right. Round two. All right. Let me see. 1, 2, 3. Hey Lex, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Grant?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm super excited to have you on the show. Not only to just to understand your mindset in your journey, but just how you've overcome adversity as an athlete and personally things that you've gone through with your blindness. And I think your story is just it's incredible, and I can't wait to share it with my listeners today.
Absolutely. I'm super excited. It should be a great conversation.
All right. All right. Well, then let's get it going. My favorite topic is mental toughness. And I know just doing a lot of research and talking with you, you've had to deal with a lot of mentally tough situations. So when you think about the words mental toughness, what does that mean for you?
Mental toughness to me is our ability to withstand challenging circumstances.
And then when you think about now, again, there's a lot of things that you've had to go through your life, through all the Olympics and world championships. Is there a specific time where you had to be mentally tough?
Yeah, I think that the most obvious one would be overcoming blindness. But when you think about it from an athletic standpoint, in 2015, we had our world championships in Doha, Qatar. And as a blind long jumper, I have a guide who stands at the takeoff board where I'm supposed to jump from, and he's clapping and yelling, giving me that auditory reference so I know which direction to run. And from there, it's me running as straight as possible, counting my strides. And once I get to the appropriate stride, then I jump, fly through the air, land in the sand. But on this particular day, I didn't land inside of the long jump pit. I landed on the side of it. So
Wow.
if you can imagine, that is, there's there's no sand there. It's concrete essentially. And you're in the middle of a world championship. So for me mentally, it was number one, first and foremost, making sure that I was good, that I was that my body was okay, and that I wasn't terribly injured. Of course, I had a couple bruises and a gash or two, but at that time, I'm on the global stage and I'm thinking about winning. So I went to the medical area to make sure that I could get bandaged up and get clearance to return to the competition. And from there, it was literally getting myself to understand that, you know what, things happen at the end of the day. And I know that as an athlete who's blind, there's a possibility that something like that, a crash, it may happen. And I wanted to make sure that, you know, my guide was okay. He can actually see in this equation. So wanted to let him know that, hey man, at the end of the day, I don't trust you any less. I don't think of you any less. Let's get back out here and make it happen. There was a job that I wanted to do. I wanted to win gold. We had one more jump remaining. Got back out there. My guide helped me get to my starting point. He jogged to the takeoff board. He starts clapping and yelling. I locked in, focused, took off in his direction. And that jump ended up being, that was my best jump of the competition.
Wow.
And ended up getting the gold medal.
Wow. You know, I asked this question because I know that, you know, athletes that can see, right, when they do mess up or they have a mistake, their emotions get involved, and they get involved because the environment, I think there's a couple things that come into play, but so they see people, like the way they react to their failure. And so that adds to their emotion and adds to the whole experience. So when you actually went through that experience, what was the emotion like? Was there any embarrassment, or was it like, hey, got to get ready for the next one, right? Since you don't see people's reactions, does that affect your emotions at all when you do actually make a mistake?
I think in that particular event, when I had landed, I could certainly hear people's reactions and their voices. And it was that sound that people make when they
Right.
see something excruciating, like, oh.
Right,
and I, you know, for me, I had a lot of adrenaline going, and I'm really pumped up for the competition. So I remember being embarrassed, and largely due to the fact that had never happened to me to that degree. And I've been on the sidelines before where it's happened to other athletes, and I've always thought to myself, you know, that's not going to happen to me.
Right.
And then it does happen. And again, you're on the global stage. So not only are people inside of the stadium, but there's people watching on the live stream, on the internet, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, it was embarrassing. There was a bit of being ashamed, again, because you're on display for everyone to see.
Right.
And you know, for sure had those emotions that were creeping in. But again, at the end of the day, it's like, you know, get yourself balanced, get back into that neutral space so that you can get through the competition.
Yeah, for sure. Now, before we get into kind of we'll go back into your story in a second here, but I always love talking about our proudest moments. Now, you've been in 4, Paralympics, and you've won tons of medals. And you've done incredible things with your career. When it comes to your athletic career, what do you think is like your proudest moment?
Oh, that is a tough one. I would say the first games that I was a part of, that was really special because it's your first time. I had just graduated from high school, and it was probably 10 years prior to that was when I was dealing with a lot of the operations and dealing with transitioning from being able to see to not being able to see. So when you think about walking inside of that stadium for the first time, actually backing up, getting on that flight to cross over the ocean for the first time, and you land in Athens, Greece, the birthplace of the
Right.
Olympics,
Right.
and you feel that culture and that atmosphere, and you hear the voices and athletes from all over the world, and then you fast forward to being inside of the stadium. You got thousands of people in there, and they're watching you. I was competing on the first day of track and field competition, so there was a lot of people there, and to be out there on that track in front of everyone, and I would say even more than that, specifically my mom, my grandmother, Coach Whitmer, and his wife, for them to be there to see me compete and then to see me get on top of the podium, that was the icing on the cake because they helped establish the foundation that allowed me to see my potential, and I was able to catapult from there.
Wow. And I can only imagine, maybe just because I'm very kinesthetic, so I operate from feeling as my primary, if you will, but I
Yeah.
can only, just considering going into things um, you're going through your first Olympic, Paralympic, and you're in Greece and you're feeling it, like to feel energy, to feel that. I mean, it gave me goosebumps when you were talking. I was
Yeah.
like, wow. I mean, how awesome is that?
Yeah. No, that energy is absolutely amazing. And that's how I that's essentially how I see the world, through a lot of the energy that I get from people, from things, from environments. So it's almost like I'm thinking the Super Mario reference. You hit the box, and that you get that power flower,
Yeah.
and that energy is just amazing.
Oh man, it's beautiful. Well, that's beautiful. Well, let's, for my listeners, uh, go back to kind of the beginning of all of this. When you were 8 years old, you started to lose your eyesight, and you started to deal, obviously, with that whole experience, and it was definitely a life-changing event. Can you share a little bit about that whole experience and that transition and how it led you into to being an athlete?
Yeah, I had come home from school. I was in elementary school at the time, and had went through my normal routine. That night, as I was in the bathroom, I was getting ready for bed. I started realizing that I was losing my sight. And at that time, it was literally, I'm looking at the lights and they look faint. I
Mhm.
look into the mirror and it's hard for me to see my reflections. It's challenging. It's really hard for my eyes to focus on what I'm seeing. We went to the doctor, and after an examination, they said I needed to have an emergency operation because I was suffering from retina detachments. I had one operation, which was successful. I could see well for about 3 to 4 weeks. And after that, the same problem happened again. My sight began to get blurry again, this time more than what it was the time before. So we go in, retina detachments again, have a second operation, get it fixed. I could see well for about 3 to 4 weeks. After that time, same problem happens again, retinas detached, going for a third operation. That was literally the pattern for the entire time that I was 8 years old. And it led to, I had 10 operations that year. And after the last one, doctors said that there was nothing else they could do to help my sight. And they said that I would most likely become blind. So from
Wow.
there, it's go home, go through your daily routine, go to sleep at night, wake up the next morning, and you see a little less than what you do the day before, until one day you wake up and you're not able to make out much of anything, that was definitely challenging for sure.
Wow.
But I think that even going through that process, I think that when you rewind back to going through those 10 operations, the first, I'm gonna say the first two or three, you're optimistic and you're thinking that, okay, these specialists are going to get it right and they're going to stabilize my sight. I'm going to be able to see clearly again. After the third one and nothing really changes, now you migrate into operations 4, 5, 6, and the feelings are
Right.
optimistic, kinda, but also thinking to yourself that I don't really know. And then you move to 8, 9, 10, and I think at that point, subconsciously, I feel like I was already preparing myself for, okay, this may be reality. And when it finally did happen, it was it was definitely tough. You Even though it was only 8 years, that's that's a significant amount of time to be able to see the world, and to lose it, it was tough. You're not able to see your mom, your family, your neighborhood. You're not able to see to read and write and draw pictures, see people's facial expressions. All of those things are completely gone. And even outside of that, all of the challenges that came with it in terms of just the social aspect of things, and then of course the topic that we're talking about, the mental aspect of it. And
Right.
mental is everything. So it was certainly a challenge, but my mom has been a really big influence, and her goal for me was literally, I just want you to be independent and be able to do things on your own so that you can go out and live the life that you want to live. So she found someone to teach me how to read braille. She kept me in public school, mainstream. She found different resources and tools and technology, different people to help me, to expose me to different things, and put me in a
Wow.
position to where I could see mentally that you still can go out here and get the job done at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And a few years later in high school, I met a teacher named Brian Whitmer, and he was my teacher of the visually impaired, which is a person who makes sure that you have all of the accommodations and everything you need from an accessibility standpoint, so that that academic experience could be the best possible. And one of the other things that he was responsible for was going to PE class with me, and it was through a physical fitness test that we all had to participate in, where he recognized that I had a couple athletic gifts,
Wow.
and he asked me if I knew about the Paralympics. I said, nah. He said, well, it's the largest, the highest pinnacle competition for athletes who have a physical disability, and you could potentially go there one day and represent Team USA and become a great athlete. And I gravitated towards the idea of being able to compete, to win medals, and to break records.
Wow. Well, and I definitely want to get into that relationship with Brian, but because obviously I haven't experienced what you went through. However, I did experience being handicapped for 4 years from my hip surgeries, and you and I were talking about that before the show. And
Yeah.
I had to go through surgeries, and where I was getting excited, and then I came out worse than I did when I first went in. And so there was just a lot of stuff I had to go through. And so there was a lot of adversity. There was a lot of emotion and negative emotion that I had to deal with and work through. And it sucked during that time. I mean, it
Yeah.
really did. However, I always believe in that. What I've learned from that, the lesson was that where there's a crisis, there's an opportunity. So now I can go there. I saw the opportunity, I capitalized on it, and I'm glad I went through it.
Yeah.
Now, as an 8-year-old kid, I mean, like, you're still developing. And so to deal with that type of
Yeah.
adversity, it's huge. It's tough. So for you, after all these years, even though that you are blind, do you still, with that crisis that happened when you were 8 years old, is the Olympics, being an athlete, the success, these opportunities, is that the opportunity coming through this life-changing event?
I think that that's part of it. I definitely think that that's an important layer to it, but I think that it was literally all of the people who put their effort and energy into helping me just to see that I could go out here and be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Like literally me realizing that was the door that I was able to walk in and see everything else that was possible.
Got it. And with that, you're talking about people, instrumental people, I'm sure like your mother and a few other people, but how instrumental was Brian not only getting you to find this gift as an athlete, but coaching you, and is he still involved with your journey as we speak?
He's still involved to a certain degree. He's not my coach specifically right now, but of course he was the one that got all of this started, and we still keep in touch. And I know that I can always call on him or text him or anything, if I need him. And that relationship though, starting off, it was huge. Of course, we already had a teacher-student relationship because he was making sure that from an academic standpoint, I was doing what I needed to do. And he held me accountable as well, because if I didn't get good grades, then there were consequences that came with that. I wasn't able to participate in certain activities or sports. I think that that was huge. Also, you have to make sure that you're handling your business in order to be able to take advantage of all of the extracurricular activities. And so that was huge, to have that figure, that person who held you accountable, but at the same time saw your potential, devoted his time and his energy, and gave me wisdom, and I was able to eventually trust him 100%. You talk about running without being able to see and then propelling yourself in the air. That's a different type of trust. And to be able to build that with him, and I speak a lot about vision now, and he helped me to see that vision initially, that vision of being able to compete around the world and represent my country, and even past that. I think that although it was athletics, he was also another person who helped me to see that there was way more beyond the horizon.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And I want to talk about the whole process. I mean, you talked about the ultimate trust, and especially when you're running and jumping, and you're blind doing it, and so you're putting so much trust. Now, I can only imagine through the process of honing into your craft, there was a lot of falling down. There's a lot of frustration. You think about sports like skateboarding. Like the whole premise of skateboarding is to actually fall down and get right back up.
Yeah.
That's how you learn, right? And a lot of sports are that way as well. But
Yeah.
how did you get through those times where, whether if you ran into something or the frustration of not seeing, emotionally, how did you talk yourself through those moments?
Oh, I think there were a couple things. I think the first one was literally what you just talked about. And in order for us to really get where we want to go in life, you have to do things, you have to experience things, you have to act on those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that if I sat on the sidelines, if I didn't challenge my comfort zone, then there was no way any of this would be possible. And to even get to that point, I had to ask myself, well, you have this guy who believes in you. He's telling you that you can go to this country, that country, and win gold medals and all of these things. If you literally don't get out here and try it, you're wiping that possibility off of the face of the earth. Like there's no way it's going to happen for you. And so I think that when we're faced with these overwhelming circumstances, you always have to ask yourself, if I don't try it out, if I don't give it a shot, if I don't put myself out there, what sort of potential success and opportunities am I just totally throwing out of the window by not even trying it out?
Right.
And so I didn't want to live 10, 15, 20 years down the line and be that person, well, I could have did this or I could have did that.
Right.
I would much rather step into something and step into an opportunity and fail versus not trying it at all. Because that, again, you think about that mental aspect, that it can eat at you. Say, oh man, I wonder what life would have been like had you did X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And so when we're faced with these times, you just have to ask yourself, all right, are you okay? Are you content with not trying this out? Or, do you want to see what could potentially happen?
Yeah. You know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing a lot. It's about showing up, about getting to, like, I get to show up, and you're taking those opportunities. And I love that. Now, you talked about failure, which I think is probably a good thing to talk about, because we all know that the whole process of being successful is you have to fail. You have to learn from those mistakes. So when you were trusting the way you were moving your body and trusting Brian and trusting the people around you, what was it like for you to deal with the failure, the emotional side of it? Was it even that much harder because you couldn't see, or did you have a better relationship with failure?
I think that it probably seemed like it was harder, and a lot of that may have been me in my own mind and thinking that, okay, people are looking at me weird, and they're just wondering if I'm going to do this correctly. And so you think about all of those things on top of what you're supposed to do anyway. And now it's like you're putting unnecessary pressure on yourself. I felt embarrassed, and I felt ashamed, and I felt that fear also as well. You think about being out there, not being able to see, and you're wondering if you're doing it correctly. You're wondering if you look like the other athletes as you run and jump. Does it look, and with all of those things going through your mind and through your body, it certainly is challenging. But that's the beauty of being amongst people who are like-minded, having teammates who believed in me, and people who were inspired by me, and people who I was inspired by, and having that safe place where you could really, figuratively speaking, fall down and mess up and make mistakes. At the end of the day, that's the beauty of life, being able to figure out how to make those alterations and changes.
Yeah. And, we talked, we're talking about the mental game. And there's so many things you can do to condition your mind for whatever part of that performance that you're training for. So, one of the things that I teach, and I think it's very vital, is to visualize your performance.
Yeah.
So how much, since that obviously you can't see, but you can see in your head, how much do you do that from a visualization standpoint? And how much did that, and if you do, how much has that allowed you to gain confidence in your long jump, in your running, right? Like, share with me a little about that.
No, it's huge, because I feel like it's an absolute blessing. I believe that I was able to see at one point in time, because now when I have conversations with my guide or with my coach, my strength and conditioning coach, whoever, they can make references to certain things, and I can literally close my eyes and remember what those things look like. I have an idea of what those things that they speak about are, what they were like.
Right.
And so the literal aspect of it, when we step out onto the long jump runway, my guide is showing me how wide the runway is, how long it is, where the takeoff board is, the takeoff point is. Then he shows me how wide the long jump pit is and how long the long jump pit is. And what that is doing is that's giving me the ability to feel and imagine what this area is like. And so circling back to those days of me being able to see, I'm able to create this image in my head. And as you just said, when you talk about confidence, when I feel like I can visualize what is going on in my head, it almost like it literally feels like I have this renewed sense of sight or vision, if you will.
Yeah.
And now I feel more comfortable and confident in the competition because it's like I could see what's going on.
Oh man, that's beautiful. And you do a lot. I mean, you're not just a long jumper. You triple jump, 100 meter, 200 meter, 4x1 relay. So you do a lot. What's your favorite event?
It would be long jump. That's what I was introduced to first. And that's my bread and butter at the end of the day. So I
Yeah.
certainly love it.
Now I'm obviously I'm about feeling. I love tapping into emotions and feeling. I can only imagine when you doing the long jump and you're in the air, right? Just describe to me and also my listeners, what does that feel like? I can only imagine kind of like a bird for a brief second, but what does that feel like when you're completely in the air? Just flying.
It happens super fast. So you're speeding down this runway, you launch into the air, and yeah, it happens fast. But I know you can relate to this as an athlete. You have those times where you get into this zone, and when you're in the zone, everything slows down, and it's almost like you're watching that movie, and it's this slow motion scene. And so for those times when I'm in that zone, I literally feel as though for X number of seconds, I am suspended in the air. I'm gliding, and eventually my feet hit the ground. And I think that, I don't know, I love the sport a lot because the challenge with long jump is you're wanting to get out there as far as possible, but you have gravity that you're working against. And for me, gravity has shown up in the sense of people's expectations and what they've felt like I should and should not do, and what I could and could not do. And so when you think about long jumping, that is my ability to get out there, to run, and to relieve myself of all of these things, all of these expectations, and ultimately try to not even try to, but ultimately defy gravity. That is what people think.
Man, I love that. That is just beautifully said. And you talk about zone or being in flow. And again, I've never won a medal. I know you have, but I would imagine outside of winning a medal or a championship, for me and being an athlete, I think the most beautiful thing you can experience as an athlete is being in zone, where everything is slowed down, but you're doing everything right. Or the opposite, everything's going really fast, but you're doing everything right, and you're dominating. It's such a beautiful experience. And man, I talk to athletes all the time, and once they feel that, it's kind of like they want to get addicted to it, right? They want it more.
Yeah,
Right. But it's just a beautiful, beautiful experience as an athlete.
for sure.
So before we wrap up here, I have a couple questions, and I know right now the whole world's going through, not only the world, but the athletic world is going through this turbulent times with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And from your perspective, if you were to send a message out to athletes or a message out to young athletes during this time, like what would that be?
I would say that as challenging as things are right now, the one of the most important aspects of life is recognizing change
Right.
and realizing that change is it's inevitable. Literally every second that we're breathing, every second that we're on this earth, there's some sort of change that is happening around us, within us, and our ability to recognize that and ultimately manage it appropriately. That is how you're going to realize success in life. And what we're dealing with right now, obviously we're all having to operate differently with the pandemic and just everything that's going on in and around our country. But again, if we're able to get where we need to get mentally, stay kind of, balanced, and ward off the pressures and those emotions. And I think also realizing that we all have these emotions and feelings. We all feel great at times. We all feel terrible, and sometimes we get embarrassed and ashamed, and we feel fear, and sometimes we don't trust people. There's so many things that go on within us, but that's natural. That's the human experience. But our ability to manage those things and ultimately manage the change that we experience in life, that is what's going to lead us to success.
I love it. I love it. Uh, there's so many cool messages out there, and we right now we're living in a very fear-based world, and I get it. But we can move with change. We can make our own change. And I talk
Yeah,
about connection, like stay connected to your craft, stay connected to the people that feed you.
right.
And, and as everything's changing, man, you're changing too, but you're connected to the right things.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. The connection is huge because think about me specifically in competing. I have my guide, and although we're many feet away from each other, he's clapping and yelling, and I'm connected to the sound of his voice. And so when I don't hear him anymore, now I'm disconnected. And so similar to life, if we're disconnected, we feel lost. We don't know which direction to go. And so it's
Mm.
huge having that constant connection, especially with those who genuinely love you, care for you, and want to see you go out here and fly to new heights in life.
Definitely. No pun intended, right?
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. Okay, last question, man. This is deep. It's always my favorite one, and it's all around reflection. And I feel that's where we get our growth and how we develop is to reflect on our lives and our performances. So when you think about your whole career, what do you think you've learned the most about yourself?
What have I learned the most about myself? I think that I've learned that no matter what I'm faced with in life, there's always a path to that desired destination. And it doesn't have to be a path that someone else has traveled before. It can be one that I create myself. And you can have, I use this example with kids a lot. You have the number 12. Just because somebody uses 6 plus 6 doesn't mean that you have to choose that same equation. You can do 3 times 4. You can do 24 minus
Right.
12. There's so many equations that you can use to get to the same solution. And, for me, my life is different, and I'm cool with that. I love it because I get to figure out the paths to, excuse me, I get to figure out the paths that work the best for me to get to a similar destination that others want to get to also.
Man, I love it. I love it. How can my listeners, how can they connect with you, learn more about your journey, follow you on social media?
For sure. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Lex Gillette on everything. That's LexGillette. And I have a site, lexgillette.com. And yeah, hit me up. I'm very responsive on social. And actually, I released a book a few months ago entitled Fly, and that's available on my site as well. Would love for people to get that and support. But yeah, I'm always out here uh, being responsive and chit chatting on the social.
Awesome. Well, that's great. I encourage everyone to check out his book. I know what it's like to be an author and what it takes to write a book. So, I'm going to pick it up myself. But Lex, man, this has been an honor, man. I love your story. Keep doing what you're doing. I can't wait to see you get that gold next year, right?
Yes, next summer. Yes.
That's what I'm talking about. Good, man. Well, again, thanks for sharing your story and your energy, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Grant. It was a pleasure.
You bet.